Let me tell you the story of a man named Ignaz Semmelweis, a doctor from long ago, whose name you might not hear often, but whose work saved countless lives. You see, Ignaz was born in Hungary in 1818, and when he grew up, he became a doctor, working in the big hospitals of Vienna, Austria. Now, back in those days, something terrible was happening in hospitals, especially in the maternity wards where mothers gave birth. Many young women, after delivering their babies, would suddenly fall very ill with a deadly fever called childbed fever, or puerperal fever. It was a terrible thing. Women would give birth, and instead of going home to raise their babies, they would die in pain within days, and no one could figure out why. Doctors and nurses were confused. Some thought it was bad air or bad luck. But Ignaz, he was a curious man. He wanted to get to the bottom of it. He noticed something strange. There were two different wards for childbirth in the hospital. In one ward, where doctors and medical students worked, many women got sick. But in the other ward, run by midwives, women weren't getting as sick. Why was that? Ignaz scratched his head and observed the doctors and students more closely. He noticed that before they helped women give birth, the doctors would often come straight from the autopsy room where they'd been examining dead bodies. Back then, people didn't know much about germs, and no one thought it was important to wash their hands after touching a corpse. The doctors would go straight from a dead body to a mother without washing up. That's when Ignaz had a flash of insight. What if, he thought, the doctors were carrying something on their hands from the dead bodies to the women? Something invisible, but deadly. And so, Ignaz came up with a simple solution: hand washing. He insisted that everyone, doctors and students alike, must wash their hands thoroughly with a chlorine solution before seeing any patients. It was a bold idea because at the time, no one thought hand washing could prevent disease. And guess what happened? As soon as the doctors started washing their hands, the number of women dying from childbed fever plummeted. It was like a miracle. Ignaz had found the key to saving lives. His simple discovery of hand washing was so powerful, it could have saved millions of people. But here's the sad part of the story, and it always breaks my heart when I think of it. Ignaz's colleagues didn't want to listen to him. They thought he was insulting them by suggesting that they were making their patients sick. Imagine that. They refused to believe that something as simple as washing hands could be important. Ignaz tried to tell the world, but many doctors ridiculed him, and he grew more frustrated as people ignored his discovery. Over time, Ignaz became bitter. He knew he was right, but no one would listen. His mind started to break under the strain of knowing how many lives could have been saved if people had only washed their hands. Tragically, he was committed to a mental asylum where he died at the young age of 47. It wasn't until years later, after Ignaz was gone, that scientists like Louis Pasteur and Joseph Lister proved that germs, tiny invisible organisms, caused disease. Suddenly, people realized that Ignaz Semmelweis had been right all along. Today, every hospital in the world follows the rule of hand washing. But Ignaz, the man who first figured it out, didn't live to see how much of a difference he made. So whenever you wash your hands, remember the name Ignaz Semmelweis, the doctor who tried to save the world with soap and water, even when no one believed him. He's a hero who showed us that even the simplest things can change the course of history.